Moon Knight is the newest MCU series starring Oscar Isaac, but is it worth a watch? Stephen Grant discovers he's been granted the powers of an Egyptian moon god, but he soon finds out that these newfound powers can be both a blessing and a curse to his troubled life. A new MCU series, I swear we're getting a new one each week nowadays, but I was so excited for this. I like Oscar Isaac, and I like when they find comic book characters that no one's ever really heard of, except for die-hard comic book fans. I've never heard of Moon Knight. None of my friends have heard of Moon Knight. And we saw that Super Bowl trailer, and it looked really different, a little dark, and we were all in for it. And before I talk about the show, I'll say that there will be some spoilers. I'm not going to go into crazy detail about what I'm going to talk about, but I will talk about some things that will be considered spoilers, so you have been warned. What do I think of Moon Knight, or Season 1 of Moon Knight? Or maybe this is the whole series. Who knows? What do I think of it? I thought this was a unique entry to the MCU. There are some things I absolutely loved, and there are some things I'm like, that's whatever. But let's first talk about the pilot. I love the pilot here. I think this is the best pilot in the MCU series so far. The only one that I can think of that is close to this is the Loki pilot. And I just love how it feels so standalone at first. And honestly, the whole series feels standalone. But what I mean by that is we're finally getting a brand new character that has a real backstory that you really connect with. And it feels like it's not tying into anything. It's not setting up for some MCU crazy cameo or anything like that. The show feels somewhat different in that way. That's my biggest compliment I can give the show. Yes, it would be fun to see some sort of tie-in because there really isn't any tie-in at all. But I like how it stands on its own. I like how you connect with Stephen Grant or Mark Spector or whoever you want to call him. And it becomes a really interesting show. And that pilot, I think, executed all that perfectly. And I love the ending. The introduction of Moon Knight, the first time we see him in his costume, is spectacular. That was a great sequence. It was one of the best introductions for a character in the MCU that I've seen in a while. And let's talk about Oscar Isaac, because I think he's spectacular here. He has to play two different characters. One's this mercenary, then one's this cowardly guy that has no idea what the fuck is going on. And the way that he switches in between his characters is really fascinating, and it's really well done. Oscar Isaac, in my opinion, really carries this whole entire series. I don't think the series would be nearly as good, or honestly, I don't even think the series would be very good without Oscar Isaac. He is great here. The character of Mark Spector and Stephen Grant is really fascinating. I love that second to last episode where we get the backstory of Mark Spector and kind of get a better idea of everything that's going on. It makes the character more relatable, he has flaws, and overall more interesting. And that is probably all the positives I'll say about Moon Knight. I really enjoyed the series, and I would say it is probably my second favorite MCU show, or maybe third, maybe right behind WandaVision. But there's a lot of things I loved about this series. I loved how different and strange it is. I mean, the episode where they are in the psych hospital and then a hippo appears. Like, what the fuck's going on? I love when the MCU really tries some strange shit. It's great, and it normally works out. Here, I think when they do all that stuff, it's great. I think everything they do with Mark and Steven is great. There's really interesting things going on. And there's some great action sequences when they are Moon Knight. And I loved in the first episode the sequences where Steven's about to fight someone and then he blacks out and then he appears in a completely different location. There's just dead bodies all around him. Like, all that shit is really well done. But I think the problem with this show is it sometimes falls in the same formula of these Marvel shows where we got to stop this larger-than-life thing, and you kind of lose interest in what's going on. And I'll be honest, I understand what they're trying to stop. I understand, where they need to go to stop this thing, but I was still somewhat confused of what was going on. I'm not even talking about the sequence where they're in the psych ward, and it switches between Steven and Mark. To me, that is still confusing to me, and I'm sure we're going to get some answers to that because I'm still confused by a lot of that. I'm so confused, how Steven is Mark, and there's this new guy, Jake, now. I'm confused by all of that, and there's some other things I'm confused by, but those things I feel like we'll eventually get answers to and will eventually make sense. But there are just some times throughout the show where the objective that they're trying to do didn't seem clear to me sometimes. I didn't really know what they were trying to do. I get the overall picture, but the individual missions still didn't really make sense to me. And because of that, throughout the middle of the series, it feels somewhat sluggish And then we get this great episode in episode 5 where we learn the backstory of Mark and Steven. Like, that's all great. Even the episode before that is pretty well done. But overall, the whole experience does feel a little bit slow in this MCU adventure. And then with the finale, it's pretty well done. I think this is one of the better MCU series finales, but I just hate that we had to get another giant CGI monster fight. Like, we don't need to do that. The things that are important are the conflict with Mark and Steven, and I think all of that was really well done, but I feel like we should have focused more on that. I know that was the main focus, but I'm saying we should just focused on that. I don't need to see Kanju fight a giant alligator. Like, that part wasn't really that interesting. I'm not trying to shit on Moon Knight because I really did enjoy it. I really liked the mystery behind it. I thought it was really well done there. I love Oscar Isaac here. Stephen Grant and Mark Spector are interesting characters. And Moon Knight himself is really fucking cool. I loved a lot of the sequences in this series. Like the sequence when Stephen finally has the suit and he has to fight a monster. Like, all that is a lot of fun. There's a lot of great moments in the series. And I really appreciate that so far Moon Knight hasn't tied into something bigger in the MCU. It feels like its own thing. I just wish that the pacing in this whole series was a little bit better. I wish it was a little bit more interesting throughout, a little less confusing, and I wish sometimes it didn't fall into the normal MCU tropes that we're used to, because I really do think this is one of the more unique things the MCU has ever made, and there's a lot of great moments here, and this is one of my favorite MCU series. But I think that if you fix some of those problems, this could have been a great series, and right now I think it's just good. But overall, I still had a blast with Moon Knight. And if you're a fan of the MCU, you should definitely check it out. I'm going to give Season 1 of Moon Knight 8 Davey Daves. I really thought this episode was going to tie into Doctor Strange somehow. Like, there's going to be some multiverse thing going on, which I'm kind of glad they didn't do that. It would have been cool and fun, but like I've been saying, I like how it stands on its own, this series. So, Moon Knight, let me know what you guys thought of it once you've seen it. I'm curious to hear. And thank you so much for watching. Click here to see more of Davey Dave's Takes.